The man in the casket was feared in life and revered in death. His empire built on lies, his wealth amassed through manipulation. He crushed competitors, humiliated rivals, silenced dissent. And now, the room is full. Executives fly in on private jets. Old enemies send flowers. A priest speaks of virtue. A screen plays his legacy. The music is tasteful. The eulogy is glowing. No one dares to speak the truth. No one says he was cruel. No one says he exploited the weak. No one says he was ruthless, cold, unfeeling. Because it's not what he did that they remember. It's that he won. And deep down, we admire that. We say we want kindness, fairness, integrity. But we keep rewarding something else entirely. Charisma, dominance, certainty. The ability to take and not flinch when others suffer. This funeral is not rare. History is filled with them. Funerals for men who brought nations to their knees. Who enslaved, who deceived, who ruled not through love but through fear. And yet they are remembered as great. Statues are built, streets named, their sins washed in the tide of success. Because, as Nietzsche once asked, why do the worst people always seem to rise to the top? He wasn't just talking about tyrants. He was talking about something more insidious. The everyday triumph of the cunning over the kind. The bold over the humble, the liar over the listener, the narcissist over the noble. In every institution, from corporations to governments, from art to religion, we witness the same silent pattern. Those most willing to abandon conscience are often those most rewarded with power. But what if this isn't an accident? What if it's not a glitch in the system, but the system itself? Nietzsche believed morality is not truth. It's a narrative, a story told by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. But here's the twist. The strong don't read that story. They write their own. And those who dare to live outside the script, who don't ask permission, who don't apologize for their will, they rise, not because they are good, not because they are fair, but because they understand the game. This is Nietzsche's terrifying insight, that evil isn't always punished. It's often rewarded. That power doesn't care about goodness, it cares about will. And society, whether it admits it or not, respects power more than virtue. That's why we mourn monsters in cathedrals. That's why we romanticize tyrants in history books. That's why we scroll past the quiet, honest ones and elevate the loud, the polished, the dangerous. So maybe the question isn't, why do the worst people succeed? Maybe the real question is, what if success in its current form requires becoming someone you'd once have despised? From the time we're children, the message is clear. Be good, and good things will come. Work hard. Be honest. Share. Wait your turn. Follow the rules. Be kind. Respect others. It's the myth that structures our entire moral universe. And yet, look around. The most generous people are often overlooked. The kindest are taken advantage of. The softest voices are drowned out. The most honest are often unemployed. And the ones who rise, they bend truth with ease. They play people like instruments. They weaponize charm, not virtue. And they win. Not by being moral, but by being willing. Willing to dominate. Willing to take. Willing to be disliked, doubted, feared. Nietzsche saw this contradiction and refused to look away. He didn't comfort himself with fantasies. He asked the brutal question most people spend their lives avoiding. What if morality doesn't lead to success at all? What if the qualities we associate with being good, patience, humility, deference, selflessness, are actually liabilities in a world built on power? What if the system is not broken, but perfectly designed to elevate those who have no guilt in rising? This is where Nietzsche introduces his most explosive idea, the will to power. It's not a hunger for control over others. It's the core instinct of life itself, the drive to grow, to act, to assert, to create, to become, rather than obey. And Those who lack this drive, or bury it beneath a persona of morality, don't ascend. They stagnate because the world doesn't reward purity. It rewards clarity of will. It rewards the person who knows what they want and doesn't apologize for it. But here's the trick society plays. It tells you that to be strong is to be cruel, that to want more is to be greedy, that to speak boldly is to be arrogant, so the good suppress their instincts, and the shameless inherit the world. This is not a call to become a monster. It's a call to see clearly, to recognize that morality without will becomes submission, and will without morality becomes tyranny. The key isn't to abandon virtue, it's to integrate it with power. Because if you're waiting for the world to reward your goodness, you may wait your whole life. But if you understand Nietzsche's truth, you'll stop trying to be good enough to win and start becoming someone too whole to be ignored. Every society has a noble lie, a beautiful fiction designed to keep the people quiet and the machinery running. In our world, the lie is simple. Good people succeed, bad people fail. It's comforting. It flatters the ego. It tells us that the system is fair, that decency is rewarded, and that we just need to follow the rules. But Nietzsche called this lie by its true name, slave morality. Because, he argued, the morality we inherited wasn't created by the powerful. It was created by those who had no power, the conquered, the oppressed, the afraid. They couldn't win by force, so they rewrote the rules of virtue itself. In his eyes, there were once two great moral worlds, master morality, born from strength, independence, self-definition. The noble man acts out of abundance. He does not ask permission. He honors courage, pride, and becoming. And slave morality, born from fear, resentment, and powerlessness. The slave cannot fight the master, so he calls the master evil. He elevates meekness, obedience, and guilt, not because they are noble, but because they make his position bearable. And slowly this morality became our own. We learned to flinch at ambition, to distrust desire, to apologize for our instincts, because somewhere deep in our cultural psyche we absorbed the belief, if you're too strong, you must be bad. This is what Nietzsche called ressentiment, the quiet, smoldering hatred, the powerless, feel toward the powerful, dressed up in moral language. And in a world ruled by ressentiment, it is not the true who rise, but the ones who best perform goodness. This connects directly to Machiavelli, who warned centuries earlier in The Prince, it is not necessary to be good and only to appear so. The successful leader, Machiavelli claimed, must know how to act against morality when necessary. If he is too virtuous, he will be crushed. If he is too cruel, he will be hated. But if he walks the edge, if he understands power, he will rule. So while modern people chant, be kind, be good, be fair, the cunning nod politely, and take the throne. And then there's Max Weber, who introduced the concept of instrumental rationality, the cold, strategic mindset that dominates capitalist institutions. For Weber, ethical actions, value rationality are admirable, but they rarely succeed. Success in modernity belongs to those who think like machines, who calculate, who manage optics, incentives, and perception. And finally, we turn to Freud, who showed how morality isn't just social, it's internalized. The superego becomes the internal judge. It whispers guilt into every bold decision. It punishes desire. It suppresses instinct. And the more repressed the individual, the more they sabotage their own ascent. So while the bold act, the moral agonize, they hesitate. They consult their conscience. They apologize for their confidence. Meanwhile, the unburdened rise because the world doesn't ask, "Are you good?" It asks, "Are you willing?" Willing to risk, willing to speak, willing to stand alone. And those who are not fragmented by guilt, who have made peace with their ambition, become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, a new kind of human, one who doesn't obey the inherited morality, but creates their own values. This is the death of the noble lie, not to become evil, not to discard ethics, but to finally see clearly that goodness without power is a ghost, and power without goodness is a tyrant. You must choose integration. You must become dangerous and still choose restraint. You must confront your ambition and still hold on to meaning. Because if you don't, someone else, less burdened, less fragmented, less honest, will take the life you were meant to live. In 2001, a company called Enron collapsed in what was then the largest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history. Behind the glossy branding, the philanthropy, the leadership seminars on ethics, was a culture of lies. Top executives used obscure accounting tricks to fake billions in profit. They built a financial empire on illusion, and they got rich. By the time the house of cards fell, thousands of employees had lost their pensions, their jobs, their savings. And the architects of it all? Many walked away with fortunes and polished reputations. They weren't anomalies. They were symptoms of a deeper truth. The system isn't broken. It rewards what it was built to reward. And often that means rewarding ruthlessness over honesty, optics over integrity, performance over principle. Let's rewind further. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler rose to power, not because he was hidden or deceptive, but because he was bold, charismatic, unrelenting. He gave the German people identity, blame, and vision, three things morality rarely provides all at once. He was voted in. He didn't take power. He was given it. And those who opposed him, the moderate, the moral, the thoughtful, they were drowned out by volume and myth. History remembers tyrants not because they were good, but because they were effective. Mussolini, Stalin, Mao. Each understood that morality could be shaped or silenced if you controlled the story. But this isn't just about dictators. It's about the boardroom, the stage, the screen, the algorithm. In 2018, a study at the University of British Columbia found that narcissistic, self-promoting individuals were significantly more likely to be hired for leadership positions, not because they were more competent, but because they looked the part. They exuded confidence, they didn't hesitate, they didn't apologize. In the eyes of a nervous committee, that was enough. Now think about social media. The influencers with the biggest followings are often the least nuanced, the most provocative. They don't speak truth. They weaponize attention. They sell simplified narratives, moral outrage, curated suffering. And they succeed because the algorithm rewards performance, not principle. Because we, the audience, reward image, not depth. Even in religion, the rot runs deep. Church leaders caught in abuse scandals are often protected, not because they are innocent, but because they are important. They raise money. They draw crowds. Their sins are inconvenient. So the institution twists. It moralizes forgiveness, not to protect the vulnerable, but to preserve power. And when morality becomes a tool of preservation, not transformation, it becomes hollow, and we feel it. We see kind, thoughtful people struggle. We see self-aware individuals hesitate while the shameless take the stage. We see the cost of having a conscience in a world built on advantage, and it stings. Because we were told that being good was enough, that doing the right thing would eventually pay off. But virtue in a rigged system doesn't win. It waits. It doubts. It apologizes. Vice does none of that. Vice calculates. Vice adjusts. Vice takes. This isn't a call to abandon virtue, but to wake up, to see that morality without strength is fragile, to see that goodness without strategy is forgettable, to see that the world does not reward truth, it rewards traction. And so the question isn't just why do bad people rise? The question is, why do good people let them? There's a quiet war happening inside many people. Not between good and evil, but between their conscience and their ambition. You want to speak, but you hesitate. You want to rise, but you worry about stepping on toes. You want to say, no, but you're afraid of being cruel, so instead you play it safe. And someone else, less thoughtful, less burdened, moves forward. This is what Nietzsche saw, that morality, when internalized without reflection, becomes paralysis. He understood that those who succeed in a world driven by power are often those least haunted by guilt, not because they are evil, but because they are unfragmented. They don't carry shame for wanting more. They don't second-guess their assertiveness. They don't collapse under the weight of pleasing everyone. This is the difference between the morally rigid and the psychologically integrated. Let's bring in Carl Jung. Jung believed that when we reject parts of ourselves, our anger, ambition, sexuality, pride, those parts don't disappear. They go into the shadow. And the more moral you try to be, the more dangerous your shadow becomes. The person who prides themselves on being good may secretly feel resentment. They're too afraid to admit. They overgive. They self-sacrifice. But beneath that is bitterness, envy, fatigue. Meanwhile, the person who succeeds, they've often integrated their darker impulses. They're not pretending to be pure. They know they're ambitious. They know they want control. They know they have desire, and they don't moralize it. They own it, and in owning it, they stop being its prisoner. Because when you suppress your shadow, you don't become better, you become split. And a split self is never at peace. It doubts, it hesitates, it collapses under pressure. But the integrated self? It acts with coherence, not because it's cruel, but because it's clear. This is what Nietzsche meant by the Übermensch. Not a tyrant, not a monster, but a human being who has overcome the guilt-soaked morality of the herd. Someone who has become whole, even if the world calls them dangerous. Psychologically, this is power, to want without shame, to act without apology, to lead without self-erasure. Because most people don't fail for lack of talent. They fail for lack of permission. They won't give themselves permission to be powerful, to risk being misunderstood, to say what needs to be said, even when it's unpopular, and in that hesitation the world moves on. The louder voices rise. The unapologetic ones win. The morally unburdened walk past you, while you sit, still debating whether your desire is too much. But here's the truth. You will never change the world if your conscience is constantly begging for approval. You will never lead if every decision must be blessed by everyone you're trying not to offend. The strongest people are not unkind. They are unconflicted. They know their center. They've faced their inner contradictions. They've made peace with their own power, and maybe that's why they win. Not because they are the worst people, but because they are the least afraid of who they really are. We live in a time of moral performance, where ethics are curated like outfits, where values are filtered through branding guidelines and dopamine-driven timelines, where doing the right thing matters less than being seen doing it. This is not morality, it's marketing, and Nietzsche saw it coming. He warned that once a culture elevates the appearance of virtue over its substance, morality becomes a performance art, an aesthetic. Look around. Cancel culture doesn't seek reflection, it seeks spectacle. We don't listen, we judge. We don't teach, we purge. What matters is being on the right side of the trending narrative, not whether you've wrestled with the complexity of truth. Corporate ethics are weaponized. Companies post about mental health while burning out their employees. They celebrate Pride Month for marketing reach, but fund policies and practices that reinforce exclusion behind the scenes. The illusion is meticulously managed. The reality is rarely confronted. Social media influencers cry on camera, apologize on cue, make public amends, but the algorithm never asks if the growth is sincere. It only asks if it gets clicks. Virtue becomes a product. Suffering becomes a content pillar. We trade empathy for optics. And what does this do to the soul? To the individual trying to be real in a world addicted to display? They become exhausted, anxious, hyper-vigilant, terrified of saying the wrong thing, crushed under the weight of being good enough for the crowd. And yet, right next to them, others thrive by doing the exact opposite. They manipulate narratives. They manufacture outrage. They rise through shamelessness and are rewarded for it because in the era of ethical collapse, being truly moral, thoughtful, honest, uncertain is dangerous. It slows you down. It makes you hesitate. It gets you replaced by someone who knows how to play the game. Nietzsche would have called this the final consequence of slave morality, a world where truth no longer matters, only performance does. And in this world, those with real conscience suffer. They are either chewed up by the machine or forced to hide who they are just to survive inside it. Because when goodness is no longer practiced in private but monetized in public, morality dies. Not with a scream, but with a standing ovation. What happens when you stop trying to be good? Not cruel, not careless, not evil, just not good in the way the world taught you. Not obedient, not guilt-ridden, not endlessly apologetic for your desires, your voice, your depth. What happens when you stop performing goodness and start embodying truth? Nietzsche believed that most people don't live. They perform. They inherit a script. They wear a mask. They play the part of the good person, hoping that eventually life will reward them. But life isn't a fairy tale. It doesn't pay out virtue in predictable ways. It doesn't protect the innocent. It doesn't punish the wicked. And if you're waiting for the world to reward your morality, you may spend your life in quiet resentment, wondering why others rise while you stay stuck. But when you stop trying to be good, when you drop the performance, something shifts. You see how morality was often a leash, how guilt was a script written by others, how your fear of being misunderstood was never your moral compass, just your old need to belong. You see that strength is not the enemy, that power is not evil, that wanting more is not greed, it's aliveness. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to integrate. Your conscience no longer fights your ambition. Your empathy no longer erases your boundaries. Your kindness no longer silences your truth. You become whole, and in that wholeness, you discover something morality never taught you, that freedom is not found in being liked. It is found in being real, not perfect, not polished, just undeniably yourself. So let this be your question, the one that echoes long after this video ends. What if the thing holding you back isn't your weakness, but your need to be good? What if you stopped apologizing and started becoming? Because the people who change the world, they are not always the nicest, the kindest, or the safest, but they are almost always the most free.